Sangye Churdak Soki Chognam La Jam Badu Dagni Kyam Suchi Dagi Chernyangi Pesonam Ki Drola Penchu Sangye Rupan Shuk Sangye Churdak Soki Chognam La Jam Badu Dagni Kyam Suchi Dagi Chernyangi Pesonam Ki Drola Penchu Sangye Rupan Shuk Sangye Churdak Soki Chognam La Jamchu Badu Dani Kapsuchi, Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Sonam Ki, Drola Penchi Sange Du Pasho.
So let's just meditate on the breath for 2 or 3 minutes. So I think, since beginning this time, I've been circling in cyclic existence, samsara, through the 6 realms. Nearly all that time has been spent in the lower realms. This time, not only have I found rebirth in the upper realms, not only have I found rebirth as a human, but I've received perfect human rebirth with 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses. So, just that thought should fill us with great joy. And the main benefit of this perfect human rebirth that I've received this one time, this perfect human rebirth, it's so rare, it's as if I've received it only once. The main benefit is that I can strive for enlightenment in order to enlighten all sentient beings. My reaching enlightenment depends, and extracting the greatest essence from this perfect human rebirth. Reaching enlightenment depends upon studying, practicing, and realizing the entire path to enlightenment. Therefore, I'm going to study Atisha's seminal text, first lamrim text, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So like that, generate bodhicitta. Okay, so in the previous classes, I think we've done three, I think. I haven't left time for questions. So are there any questions arising from any of the previous classes or from anything? No, everyone's clear on everything?
I think Scott had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, quick question in general. I was just curious, you mentioned that this is the first lamrim text, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And I know that the tradition of Lobjong is also kind of traced back to Atisha in Tibet, unless I'm incorrect about that. I was just sort of curious, in the term, so lamrim and Lobjong, they have different denotations, but it seems to me like they kind of go back to the same tradition. They've been handed down through this, basically the same kind of waterfall of lineages, right? So what is it, just kind of a semantic difference, or is there something kind of essentially different between the two? Are they two just kind of different approaches, or are they just kind of one and the same thing, and we just kind of use different terms to talk about them?
Well, it all comes from the teachings of the Buddha. Nothing sort of made up. That wasn't the teaching of the Buddha. With Atisha's text, Lamdran, the Lamp for the Path, he just, the Buddha taught for 40 years, give or take. And, each time he taught according to the needs of the people in front of him, not according to some predetermined schedule. So, as I've said lots of times before, that, in the morning he might have very advanced students and teach, high level Tantra. And in the afternoon, he might have beginners, so he'd teach very simple teachings. And in the evening, he might have sort of intermediate students, so teach something like that. And each day was different. So when you look at the whole 40 years of teachings and think, well, what's in this for me? How do I start? Where am I on the path? It'd be very hard to kind of figure out, especially if you're sort of a beginner like us. So Atisha simply rearranged or presented the Buddha's teachings in this kind of step-like progression that indicated the three levels of the path. path to freedom from rebirth in the lower realms, the path to rebirth in the upper realms, so still in cyclic existence, and then the intermediate path to liberation from cyclic existence, and then the great path to full enlightenment. So that's what we mean by the lamrim. And Lojong is sort of within the lamrim teachings. Lojong is essentially a Mahayana teaching, it's thought transformation, where we transform everything we think, say, and do into bodhicitta. And I think the actual Lojong teachings, I'd have to check. I think it's traced back to a line or a couple of lines in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, which was written, I don't know when, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, something like that. So Lo means mind or intelligence, Jong means transformation. So it's, transforming all our actions with bodhicitta, as Rinpoche calls bodhicitta mindfulness, Lama Zopa Rinpoche calls. So Lojong teach, of course, the whole practice is really mind thought transformation. We're transforming our mind from having a worldly attitude to having an enlightened attitude. So looking at the term very, very broadly, but the way it's used is that, but specifically the way it's used, it's part of the Mahayana teachings. You don't look convinced?
No, that is very helpful. Thank you. Is there the text to by Nagarjuna that you mentioned? Is that available online somewhere?
I know online. The book, there's the Precious Garland. His Holiness gave teachings on that in Los Angeles in '97, and Wisdom produced a translation of the text by John Dunn and his then wife, Sarah McClintock, for the occasion, and it was a pretty good translation, but they said it wasn't complete. And so, over 20 years, I don't think Wisdom have brought out the complete or the approved final translation. And actually, I asked them a few months ago, or maybe last year, and they said, "Oh, it's coming." So, but I think anyway, if you look for Ratnavali, Ratnavali, Ratnavali in Sanskrit, Precious Garland, you may find a translation online. Someone wants to
Jeffrey Hopkins has, I think, a translation that there's
advice,
a book that also
Buddhist advice for living. That's Precious Garland
too.
I think the Ratnavali is also Jeffrey Hopkins has a translation, which I found in PDF form online.
Yeah. This Snow Lion, now Shambhala. Buddhist advice for living and liberation. I think there's another translation. This has the Tibetan text, and
This one's available through Wisdom.
which one's that?
Practical Ethics in Profound Emptiness.
Geshe Tekchop.
Yeah.
That's Precious Garland?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got that. I haven't really looked at it. Okay, so there are 2 translations published that we know of. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yep.
What's the difference between Lojong and Tonglen? I'm not familiar with Lojong.
Literally, Lojong means thought transformation, as we've been saying. And Tonglen means, taking and giving and taking. So it's it's a practice of within the Lojong teachings, the practice of taking suffering of others and giving them all our happiness, merit, and wisdom. It's, the meditation practice of to overcome self-cherishing. So it's part of the practice that was generally traced back to Shantideva, to Bodhicharyavatara, exchanging self for others. But it's, the two main, I'm not sure where Shantideva got it from, must have come from before, but the two main ways of developing bodhicitta are the 7 cause and effect meditation, 6 causes and the 1 effect, generation of bodhicitta, and the method of exchange of self for others. And then there's a combination of those two that Ribush Rinpoche talks about in his book called Generating Bodhicitta. That's online. Ribush Rinpoche, R-I-B-U-R. So there's a combined, I think, 11-step method combining the two. So Tonglen is just part of the exchanging self for others practice. You think of the shortcomings of self-cherishing, the benefits of cherishing others, and something else, the third one I forgot. And the fourth thing is then the practice of exchange of practice of Tonglen, taking on the suffering and negative karma, illnesses, problems of others, and giving them all our happiness and merit. And there's quite an extensive Tonglen practice taught by Rinpoche in his first lamrim book, the one we used to use at Kopan in the courses in the early to mid 70s, Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun. It's a very extensive Tonglen, very detailed, extensive Tonglen practice there. That's also, you can find that online too, as part of the Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So that's,
Thank you.
Tonglen is part of Lojong. Okay. All right, so I've done a lot of preamble. I think, as advertised, this we're going to look at Khunu Lama Rinpoche's commentary on this text. It's actually quite brief, and so I think I'll also refer to His Holiness's teachings and maybe some of Geshe Sonam Rinpoche's. Okay, so Khunu Lama Rinpoche says, well, the last thing we read was this teaching we're discussing here, then, is that written by the learned pandit Dipamkara Shrijnana, that's Atisha, the Lamdun. What is it about? It comes from Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realization and explains the 3 levels of teaching, the paths of the practitioner of small, medium, and higher capacity, especially the latter. So, you know, Atisha drew his text, the Lamdron, from, he drew from the Abhisamaya Lankara. The text opens with the title of this teaching in Sanskrit, which in Tibetan is Changchub Lamgi Dronma. So Changchub means enlightenment, Lam means path, and Dronma means lamp of the path to enlightenment. So this is followed by homage to Manjushri. And then he says the first verse includes three things. So I haven't, can you hear that? Background noise? Anyway, sorry, I have to deal with, I'll deal with it. Sorry, the TV came on. Wendy's away, so I'm home alone without adult supervision. So the TV's on all times of the day. So I need so actually the teachings from Tibet, the root text is in the back here as well. So homage to the Bodhisattva, the youthful Manjushri, is how the text starts, with salutation to Manjushri, indicates that this text comes from of the method and wisdom. This comes from the wisdom side. I pay homage with great respect to the conquerors of the three times, the Buddhas, the past, present, and future, to their teachings and to those who aspire to virtue. Urged by the good disciple Changchu Bu, so we know that story, how he invited, you know, how his uncle was imprisoned and Changchu Bu sent emissaries to India to invite Atisha to Tibet. Urged by the good disciple Changchu Bu, so, you know, he gets a shout out from Atisha. I shall illuminate the lamp for the path to enlightenment. Okay, I'll read these first 5 verses because Khunu Lama Rinpoche comments on them briefly. Understand that there are 3 kinds of persons because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities. I shall write clearly distinguishing their individual characteristics. 3rd verse. Know that those who by whatever means seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence are persons of the least capacity. 4. Those who seek peace for themselves alone, turning away from worldly pleasures and avoiding destructive actions, are said to be of middling capacity. Those who seek peace for themselves alone, you know, liberation, turning away from worldly pleasures, renunciation, and avoiding destructive actions, following karma, are said to be of middling capacity. 5, those who, through their personal suffering, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. So those are the 3, what are often called the 3 scopes. So Khunu Lama says the first verse includes 3 things. First, there is homage to the triple gem, the Buddhas of the three times, the oral teachings and realization of them, and the Sangha, those who have received the unshakable or noble path. Second, he mentions that his pure disciple, Changpa Be, requested him to give this teaching. Third, he makes the promise or vow to write this teaching, this lamp for the path to enlightenment, the Lam Dön. In the second verse, so where he talks about the three kinds of persons, in the second verse, Atisha explains what he's going to write about, the graduated paths of the persons of small, medium, and higher capacity or capability. These are also the paths that Lama Tsongkhapa explains in his short, middle length, and great lamrim teachings, the graduated paths of these types of practitioner. Then in the third verse, of the three levels of follower, Atisha first explains the graduated path of those of small capability. Such people think, I don't care what suffering or happiness I experience in this life. I must avoid rebirth in the lower realms and attain an upper rebirth. With this in mind, practitioners of small capability abstain from negative actions and practice virtue. Fourth verse, persons of medium capability develop aversion to not only the sufferings of the three lower realms, but also those of the three upper realms, to the whole of samsara. Such practitioners abstain from negative actions in order to free themselves from samsara without much concern for other sentient beings. In fifth verse, who then are the beings of higher capability? They are those who, having understood their own suffering, take it as an example of the suffering that other beings are also experiencing and generate the great wish of wanting to put an end to the suffering of all sentient beings. So, that should be us. So now to see what His Holiness has said. So about the transmission of this text, the transmission of Atisha's text, A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, was quite hard to find at one point, but I received it from my late teacher, Rigzin Tempa, who may have received the lineage from Kangsa Dorji Chung. So it was in Tibet, of course. Later, I received a teaching on it from the late Sekong Tsenchab Rinpoche, who gave the transmission in conjunction with Panchang Losang Chögyal's commentary, which he was able to present almost exclusively by heart. And we received teaching on this, Deborah, we received the teaching on this from Chodron Rinpoche, you remember? And I think he gave us the transmission of the text as well. So I think at this time, when Khunu Lama Rinpoche gave the teaching, I'm pretty sure he gave us the transmission as well, but I honestly can't remember. Generally, Geshe Tsulga used to say that we should write down all the teachings, make a list of all the teachings and transmissions we received. By that stage, I'd been receiving teachings and transmissions for in more than 30 years and hadn't been writing them down, so I figured it was too late, which it probably wasn't. But anyway, I haven't done it, I'm afraid. But if you can, I think it's probably a good thing to do. I'm pretty sure I received it. But also, Khunu Lama Rinpoche gave teaching on this to Tibetan monks at the time. That time he was in Kathmandu in early 1975, and so that teaching was all in Tibetan. But we went along and kind of sat there, and pretty sure he gave the transmission at that time as well in Gelug Monastery in Swayambhu. We received teaching. So in Kathmandu, you have these two big stupas, Swayambhu and Bodhanath, and Kopan is near Bodhanath. So we received a teaching. He was staying at Bodhanath, and we received the teaching there. And he also gave the transmission at Swayambhu. So His Holiness says about the first verse, the line homage to the Bodhisattva, the youthful Manjushri. For some reason, Manjushri is often depicted as a 16-year-old teenager. I'm not quite sure why. It's a salutation written by the translator who originally translated this text from Sanskrit into Tibetan. So maybe Atisha didn't include that in the original text, I don't know. At the end of the first verse, the author states his intention for composing this text. A Lamp for Path to Enlightenment was composed in Tibet by the Indian master Atisha Dipamkara Shrijnana during the reign of the Ngari kings Lama Yeshua and his nephew Changchubur. Well, we've been through this, so His Holiness summarizes it. Tremendous efforts were made to invite Atisha from India to Tibet. As a result of these efforts, Lama Yeshua was imprisoned by a neighboring anti-Buddhist king and actually lost his life, but Changchubur persevered and was finally successful. When Atisha arrived in Tibet, Changchubur requested him to give a teaching that would be beneficial to the entire Tibetan population. In response, therefore, Atisha wrote A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, which makes it a unique text because although it was written by an Indian master, it was composed in Tibet specifically for Tibetans. The title, A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, has profound meaning. The Tibetan term for enlightenment is Changchub, the two syllables of which refer to the two aspects of the Buddha's enlightened qualities. Jang connotes the enlightened quality of having overcome all obstructions, negativities, and limitations. So like purification. Chub literally means embodiment of all knowledge and connotes the quality of the Buddha's realization and wisdom. Therefore, Changchub means the Buddha's enlightened quality of having abandoned and overcome all negativities and limitations, purity, combined with the perfection of all knowledge, realization. Changchub Chempo, great enlightenment, is an epithet for the Buddha's enlightened state. So sometimes people talk of greater and lesser enlightenment, the lesser enlightenment being liberation or nirvana, and the great enlightenment being Buddhahood. The title, A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, suggests that this text presents the method or process by which we can actualize this state of enlightenment. When we speak about enlightenment and the path leading to it, we are naturally speaking about a quality or state of mind. In the final analysis, enlightenment is nothing other than a perfected state of mind. Enlightenment should not be understood as some kind of physical location or rank or status that is conferred upon us. It is a state of mind where all negativities and limitations have been purified and all potentials of positive qualities fully perfected and realized. Since the ultimate objective is a state of mind, the methods and paths by which it's attained must also be states of mind. Enlightenment cannot be attained by external means, only through an internal process. As we develop and improve our states of mind, our knowledge, wisdom, and realization gradually increase, culminating in our attainment of enlightenment. The metaphor of the lamp is used because just as a lamp dispels darkness, the teachings in this text dispel the darkness of misunderstanding with respect to the path to enlightenment. Just as a lamp illuminates whatever objects lie in its sphere, this text shines a light on all the various elements and subtle points of the path leading to full enlightenment. So the objects of salutation. The objects of salutation in this verse, the conquerors of the three times, are the three jewels of refuge. It's important to pay homage to the Buddha, not as just some noble object, but in terms of the meaning of Changchub. The Sanskrit term for Changchub is Bodhi, B-O-D-H-I, which conveys a sense of awakening, a state where all knowledge and realizations have been perfected. Therefore, when explaining the meaning of awakening or enlightenment, we can speak about both the process by which this awakening takes place and the state to which awakening brings us. In other words, the means and the fruition. When we understand enlightenment as a resultant state, we're primarily referring to the enlightened quality of purity, the perfected state where all negativities and limitations have been purified. There's another aspect to this purity, which is the primordially pure nature of the enlightened state. The reason why enlightenment is a perfected state where all obscurations have been purified is because natural purity is its fundamental basis. So when Lama Zopa Rinpoche put together his lamrim textbook, Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun, the first section was explanation of how the mind is beginningless, which you don't find in Tibetan texts because, in Tibet, everybody knew the mind was beginningless. And this text was for Westerners. And the second section was, how is it possible to attain enlightenment? And it's possible because, the essential nature of the minds of all sentient beings is clear light. All sentient beings have a clear light nature of mind, which is temporarily obscured by delusions, ignorance, attachment, aversion, and so forth. But these delusions are not inextricably mixed with the pure, clear light nature of mind. They're superficial or adventitious to it. So by applying the right method, practice of Dharma, they can be removed, leaving the essential purity of mind. So, that's the Dharma practice is generally eliminating delusions and their imprints, karma, from the past, and not creating more. So that's when we understand enlightenment as a resultant state, we're talking about the purification of those adventitious obscurations. When we understand enlightenment as a process or instrument by which awakening is experienced, we're referring to the Buddha's enlightened quality of wisdom. This is the Dharmakaya, the Buddha body of reality, the wisdom body or wisdom embodiment of the Buddha. And it is this wisdom that brings about the perfection and purification. So, you know, as you've heard many times, the practice of the path entails these two aspects, the method and wisdom. So, and the analogy is always given like a bird needs two wings to fly. So for us to fly to enlightenment, we need these two wings of method and wisdom. So wisdom is the understanding of emptiness, the ultimate nature, and the method is the practice of bodhicitta. So through the practice of bodhicitta on the method side, we accumulate merit, and the result of that, ultimate result of that merit is the form body of the Buddha, the Rupakaya. Rupam is Sanskrit for form, and Kaya is Sanskrit for holy body. So the holy body of form, and the ultimate result of the practice of wisdom is the wisdom body or the enlightened body, the Dharmakaya. So each of these two bodies, the Dharmakaya, the truth body, sometimes called, the Rupakaya and Dharmakaya each have two aspects. You know, the Dharmakaya, the body, the Rupakaya, I'll start from the Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya has, is the, in Tibetan it's Yeshi Choku, the wisdom body. That's the omniscient mind of the Buddha. And its ultimate nature, the emptiness of the omniscient mind of the Buddha, is called the Svabhavakaya, or nature body. The in Tibetan it's called Ngo Niku. You don't hear it very often, Svabhavakaya. The form body, the Rupa body, has two aspects. You know, if the Buddha just remained in the Dharmakaya, in just kind of relaxed there, you know, kicked back into the omniscient mind, wouldn't be able to help sentient beings, because sentient beings, because only other enlightened beings can communicate with the Dharmakaya. So in order to reach sentient beings out of the Dharmakaya, the Buddha manifests two kinds of form body, the so-called Sambhogakaya, Longku in Tibetan, which is an aspect, it manifests in order to communicate with higher bodhisattvas, that is, bodhisattvas on the 8th, 9th, and 10th levels. You know, there are 10 bodhisattva levels that we have to go through as we develop bodhicitta more and more. So the first 7 bodhisattva levels are within cyclic existence, and the 8th, 9th, and 10th level bodhisattvas are have fully realized emptiness, are beyond cyclic existence. And in order to guide them on the final stages of the path, the Buddha manifests as the Sambhogakaya, which has, see if I can remember them, 5 qualities. It's giving only Mahayana teachings. The Sambhogakaya is adorned with the 32 major and 80 minor marks of an enlightened being. It exists until the end of samsara. It is it exists in the Pure Land of Ogmin, and Ogmin or Akanishta. What's the 5th quality? Somebody? I think it's surrounded only by bodhisattvas.
Only by bodhisattvas.
Surrounded by bodhisattvas. So those are the 5 qualities of the Sambhogakaya. And the Nirmanakaya is such as Guru Shakyamuni Buddha, when the Buddha manifests. Now, it's also said that the Buddha can manifest as, as books and even as ordinary objects such as bridges and things to help sentient beings when they have the karma to receive such help. And I've never been really clear if that's also exactly the Nirmanakaya or not. So I tend to think that Nirmanakaya in Tibetan is tulku, which is also a term applied to incarnate lamas. So they've sometimes they're loosely called living Buddhas, which is bit of a stretch, really. So but anyway, so the Buddha manifests in order to help people like us as Shakyamuni Buddha, as the founder Buddha, for example, to turn the wheel of Dharma and give the teachings. So those are the 2 or 4 bodies of the Buddha, depending how you look at it. So then His Holiness says, thus we can understand the significance of the explanations of the different types of nirvana in the scriptures. So I mentioned greater and lesser nirvana or enlightenment. For example, we speak of natural nirvana, nirvana with residue, nirvana without residue, and non-abiding nirvana. So I'm sure the differences between all these kinds of nirvana have been keeping you up at night. Now we'll see if we can see if they're explained. Natural nirvana refers to the fundamentally pure nature of reality, where all things and events are devoid of any inherent, intrinsic, or independent reality. This is the fundamental ground. It is our misconception of this fundamental reality that gives rise to all the delusions and their derivative thoughts and emotions. No matter how powerful the false perceptions of reality may be at any given time, if we subject them to scrutiny, we'll find that they have no grounding in reason or experience. On the other hand, the more we cultivate the correct understanding of emptiness as the nature of reality and relate this understanding to actual reality, the more we'll be able to affirm and develop it, because it is a correct way of perceiving the world. Flawed perceptions lack grounding, experience, and reasoning, whereas grounding, experience, and reasoning support the understanding of emptiness. Thus, we will come to understand that this higher antidote, the wisdom of emptiness, can be developed and enhanced to its fullest potential. This is the understanding of natural nirvana, which makes possible the attainment of the other nirvanas. So, you know, this is a free book. It's out of print, but it's online. And, you know, if you haven't read it already, I'm kind of introducing it to you. These are kind of not concepts that we can understand the first time we hear them. So I, you know, really recommend that you find this book online, or I'm sure you can get used copies on Amazon or whatever. But if you prefer hard copy, but you can download a PDF, whatever. So, and as Lama Zopa Rinpoche always says, when we're reading books like this, we shouldn't read them like we read, you know, some magazine article. You know, you read it from beginning to end and then you put it aside. But, you know, read it slowly and stop and think and stop and think about each sentence, each paragraph, each couple of sentences, whatever, but to try and understand the real meaning of the words. So what is this natural nirvana that serves as the basis for attaining such purity and perfection? On what grounds do we know that such an ultimate nature of reality exists? We can answer these questions from everyday experience. We're all aware of the fundamental fact that there is often a gap between the way we perceive things and the way things really are. This disparity between our perception of reality and the actual state of affairs leads to all kinds of problems and confusion. However, we also know that our perception sometimes does correspond to reality accurately. If we go further, we'll see that there are two levels of reality. At one level, that of conventional or relative reality, worldly conventions operate and our perception and understanding of things and events is based purely upon the way that things appear to us. However, when we question the ultimate status of things and events and the way that they really exist, we enter another realm or level, that of ultimate reality. Then His Holiness talks about the two truths. So I mentioned the other day, you know, that His Holiness said when explaining Dharma to beginners, it's he finds it better to start with the explanation of the two truths. Sorry. Explanation of ultimate reality rather than, sorry. I knew I should have got vaccinated. I did. Sorry. Let's see if this mind over matter thing really works or not. So His Holiness said he finds it preferable to explain the nature of reality rather than talk about, which can be proven logically, rather than start teaching about karma or things on a more conventional level. So here he goes at the beginning of this teaching, he goes into the two truths. Buddhism discusses what are known as the two truths, the truths of conventional and ultimate reality. The concept of the two levels of reality is not unique to Buddhism. It's a common epistemological approach in many of the ancient Indian schools. Followers of the non-Buddhist Samkhya school, for example, explain reality in terms of 25 categories of phenomena. Khunu Lama Rinpoche talked about this, and then I referred you to Jeffrey Hopkins' book, The Meditation on Emptiness, for more detailed discussion of these non-Buddhist schools. The self and the primal substance are said to be ultimate truths, while the remaining 23 categories of phenomena are said to be manifestations or expressions of this underlying reality. However, what is unique in Mahayana, particularly in the Madhyamaka or Middle Way school, is that conventional and ultimate truths are not seen as two unrelated, independent entities, but as different perspectives of one and the same world. According to the Middle Way school of Buddhism, the ultimate truth, or the ultimate nature of reality, is the emptiness of all things and events. In trying to understand the meaning of this emptiness, we can turn to the teachings of the Indian master Nagarjuna, who brought together all the various understandings of emptiness into the single statement that emptiness must be understood in terms of dependent origination. When we talk about emptiness, we're negating what we're negating or denying is the possibility of things and events having inherent existence. This suggests that all things and events come into being purely as a result of the gathering of causes and conditions, regardless of how complex the nexus of these causes and conditions may be. It's within this nexus of causes and conditions that we can understand the complexity and multiplicity of the world of experience. There's a great diversity in the everyday world of experience, including our own immediately relevant experiences of pain and pleasure. Even pain and pleasure are not independently existent real experiences. They also come into being as a result of causes and conditions. No thing or event possesses the reality of independence and is therefore thoroughly contingent or dependent. The very existence of all phenomena depends upon other factors. It is this absence of independent status that is the meaning behind such terms as emptiness and the emptiness of inherent existence. So then His Holiness talks about the Four Noble Truths. If you find this, you can just follow online, follow along. If we examine the nature of reality more deeply, we'll find that within this complex world, there are things and events that have a certain degree of permanence, at least from the point of view of their continuum. Examples of this include the continuity of consciousness and the mind's essential nature of luminosity and clarity. There's nothing that can threaten the continuity of consciousness or the essential nature of mind. Then there are certain types of experiences and events in the world that appear evident at a particular point, but cease to exist after contact with opposing forces. Such phenomena can be understood to be adventitious or circumstantial. It's on the basis of these two categories of phenomena that the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, such as the truths of suffering and its origin, become relevant. When we further examine this dynamic, complex and diverse world, when we further examine this dynamic, complex and diverse world that we experience, we find that phenomena can also be categorized in three ways. So I mentioned this last time, I think. And again, I referred you to Jeffrey Hopkins, this chapter called The Selfless in Meditation on Emptiness. So maybe I wasn't clear. This is the first chapter in the third section of the book, I believe. It's called The Selfless, where everything that exists is analyzed and categorized. So one is the world of matter, two is the world of consciousness or a subjective experience, and three is the world of abstract entities. So neither mind nor form. I think the Tibetan term is demenduchi. And I think there are generally, 19 or 21. In Madhyamaka, they talk about, 21. I can't remember the exact number of things that are neither mind nor form. It's in the book, Meditation on Emptiness. First, there's the world of physical reality, which we can experience through our senses. That is, tangible objects that have material properties. Second, there's the category of phenomena that are purely of the nature of subjective experience, such as our perception of the world. As I mentioned earlier, we're often confronted by a gap between the way we perceive things and the way they really are. Sometimes we know that there's a correspondence. Sometimes we know there's a disparity. This points towards a subjective quality that all sentient beings possess. This is the world of experience, such as the feeling dimension of pain and pleasure. Third, there are phenomena that are abstract in nature, such as our concept of time, including past, present, and future, and even our concepts of years, months, and days. These and other abstract ideas can be understood only in relation to some concrete reality, such as physical entities. Although they do not enjoy a reality of their own, we still experience and participate in them. In Buddhist texts, then, the taxonomy of reality is often presented under these three broad categories. Out of this complex world of reality that we experience and participate in, how do the Four Noble Truths directly relate to our experiences of pain and pleasure? The basic premise of the Four Noble Truths is the recognition of the very fundamental nature we all share, the natural and instinctual desire to attain happiness and overcome suffering. When we refer to suffering here, we do not mean only immediate experiences such as painful sensations. From the Buddhist point of view, even the very physical and mental bases from which these painful experiences arise, the five aggregates of form, feeling, discriminative awareness, conditioning factors, and consciousness, are suffering in nature. At a fundamental level, the underlying conditioning that we all share is also recognized as dukkha, or suffering. So that's, the three levels of suffering he's talking about. The suffering of suffering, changeable suffering, and pervasive suffering. We always talk about those. What gives rise to these sufferings? What are the causes and conditions that create them? Of the Four Noble Truths, the first two truths, suffering and its origin, relate to the causal process of the suffering that we all naturally wish to avoid. It's only by ensuring that the causes and conditions of suffering are not created, or if the cause has been created, that the conditions do not become complete, that we can prevent the consequences from ripening. One of the fundamental aspects of the law of causality is that if all the causes and conditions are fully gathered, there is no force in the universe that can prevent their fruition. Causes and conditions come together, the result is inevitable. This is how we can understand the dynamic between suffering and its origin. So even if we've created the cause, if we can avoid the conditions coming together, that cause can't ripen, like the seed. You know, if we don't put a seed in the ground, if we leave it on a table, it won't ripen. But ultimately, it's better to destroy the seed, so to purify our negative karma. The last two truths, cessation of suffering and the path to its cessation, relate to the experience of happiness to which we all naturally aspire. Cessation, the total pacification of suffering and its causes, refers to the highest form of happiness, which is neither a feeling nor an experience. The path, the method and processes by which cessation is attained, is its cause. Therefore, the last two truths relate to the causal process of happiness. So then His Holiness talks about the objects of refuge, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It was translated here, I think, by Geshe Jimpa as the three jewels. We always hear about three jewels of refuge. As I've said before, that's the common way to which they're referred. Lama Zopa Rinpoche says he doesn't like that term. It isn't really what the term Konchok Sum in Tibetan translates to. He tries to translate it more literally as the three rare, precious, sublime ones, which is a little kind of clumsy in English. Three rare sublimes. Anyway, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. There are two principal origins of suffering, karma and the emotional and mental afflictions that underlie and motivate karmic actions. Karma is rooted in and motivated by mental defilements or afflictions, which are the primary roots of our suffering and cyclic existence. Therefore, it is important for practitioners to cultivate three understandings. One, the fundamental nature of consciousness is luminous and pure. Two, afflictions can be purified, separated from the essential nature of mind. Three, there are powerful antidotes that can be applied to counter the defilements and afflictions. So we have to cultivate these three understandings. The fundamental nature of consciousness is luminous and pure. Afflictions can be purified, and there are powerful antidotes to the defilements and afflictions. You should develop the recognition of the possibility of a true cessation of suffering on the basis of these three facts. True cessation is what is meant by the jewel of Dharma, the second of the three jewels. Dharma also refers to the path to the cessation of suffering, the direct realization of emptiness. Once you have this deeper understanding of the meaning of Dharma as true cessation of suffering and the wisdom that brings it about, you'll also recognize that there are different levels of cessation. The first level of cessation is attained on the path of seeing, where you directly realize emptiness, and become an Arya. As you gradually progress through the further levels of purification, you gain higher and higher levels of cessation. So also there are these 5 paths we talk about, so again, Jeffrey Hopkins explains them very clearly in Meditation on Emptiness, path of preparation, path of accumulation, path of seeing, which His Holiness mentions here, where we first realize emptiness and become an Arya, or a noble being, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. So you find these 5 paths in the Hinayana and these 5 paths in the Mahayana, but they have different meanings a little bit. Once you've understood Dharma in the terms of both cessation and the path, you can recognize the possibility of Sangha, the practitioners who embody these qualities. And once you've understood the possibility of Sangha, you can also envision the possibility of someone who has perfected all the qualities of Dharma. Such a person is a Buddha, a fully enlightened being. In this way, you'll be able to gain a deeper understanding of the meaning of the 3 jewels, the jewel of Buddha, the jewel of Dharma, and the jewel of Sangha. Furthermore, you'll recognize the possibility of attaining this state of perfection yourself, and a deep yearning or aspiration to do so will arise in you. Thus, you'll be able to cultivate faith in the 3 jewels, faith that is not simply admiration, but something that arises from a deep understanding of the teachings of the 4 Noble Truths and the 2 Truths, and enables you to emulate the states of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. In terms of an individual practitioner's sequence of realization, first and foremost is the jewel of Dharma. When you actualize Dharma within yourself, you become Sangha, an Arya being. As you develop your realization of Dharma, you reach higher and higher levels of the path, culminating in the attainment of the full enlightenment of Buddhahood. Dharma is the true refuge. Sangha comes next, and finally Buddha. In the historical context, Buddha came first because Shakyamuni Buddha came into being as an emanation body, Nirmanakaya, and then turned the wheel of Dharma by giving scriptural teachings. By practicing Buddha's teachings, some of his disciples realized the Dharma and became Sangha. Although historically Dharma comes second, in terms of an individual's sequence of realization, it comes first. So this book, as I've said many times, combines His Holiness's teachings on Atisha's Lamp for the Path, which is our main focus here, but also he combines it with Lama Tsongkhapa's short lamrim text called Lines or Songs or Hymns of Experience, or Songs of Spiritual Experience. So I'm basically going to skip over the parts where His Holiness talks about lines of experience and just focus on the lamp for the path. But here at the beginning, where His Holiness introduces Lama Tsongkhapa's text, the lines of experience, he talks about lamrim in general, so that of course applies to Atisha's Lamp for the Path. So I'll mention those bits. So as I also said that, there are these three texts that His Holiness, three texts that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote explaining Atisha's lamp for the path. This short one, Lines of Experience, and then the middle length, lamrim, and then the great lamrim, the lamrim chemo. The style and structure of the genre of teachings known as lamrim, which can be translated as stages of the path or graduated or graded course to enlightenment, follow the arrangement of Atisha's lamp. And the way they are set up allows any individual, regardless of his or her level of realization, to put into practice the appropriate teachings. So, as I say, the outline of the lamrim is like a roadmap to enlightenment, and like a roadmap, it allows us to identify where we are. Generally, it's somewhere near the very beginning, or even before the beginning. All the steps of the meditation practices are arranged in a logical, sequential way, so that the practitioner can traverse the path step by step, knowing what to practice now and what to practice next. The reason that this text is sometimes called Songs of Experience is because Lama Tsongkhapa has distilled all his experience and understanding of lamrim teachings into these verses and expressed them in the style of a spontaneous song of spiritual realization. The term lamrim has great significance and suggests the importance of the following 3 points. 1, the practitioner has correct recognition and understanding of the nature of the path in which he or she is engaged. Correct recognition and understanding of the nature of the path. 2, all the key elements of the path and practices are complete. And 3, the practitioner engages in all the elements of the practices in the correct sequence. With respect to the first point, the need for correct understanding of the nature of the path, let us take the example of bodhicitta, the altruistic intention. If you understand the altruistic intention to mean solely the aspiration to bring about the welfare of other sentient beings, your understanding of this particular aspect of the path is incomplete and inadequate. True bodhicitta is a non-simulated, spontaneous, and natural experience of this altruistic intention, not just the aspiration. This is how you may mistake a mere intellectual understanding of bodhicitta for a true realization. It is therefore very important to be able to identify the nature of specific aspects of the path. The second point, that all the key elements of the path should be complete, is also critical. As I mentioned before, much of the suffering we experience arises from our complex psychological afflictions. These emotional and mental afflictions are so diverse that we need a wide diversity of antidotes. Although it's theoretically possible for a single antidote to counteract all our afflictions, in reality, it's very difficult to find such a panacea. The single antidote would be the realization of emptiness, but we can't just jump into that straight away. We need a lot of other practices. We need to engage in a lot of other practices before we can get to that point of realizing emptiness. Therefore, we need to cultivate a number of specific antidotes to relate to specific types of affliction. If, for example, people are building a very complex structure, such as a spacecraft, they need to assemble an enormous variety of machines and other equipment. In the mental and experiential world, we need an even greater diversity of means. You know, the advice of the lamas usually is when we're embarking on the actual practice to start dealing with our delusions and, get serious about our practice. Where we should start is with our strongest delusion. Like if our strongest delusion is anger, then that's what we should, antidotes to anger are where our basic first practices should be. Then, or if it's attachment, or if it's jealousy, or some other strong delusion, then we should try to get rid of that first. And then the second most prominent delusion, then the third. So gradually whittle them away like that. So we need to deal with, the strong delusions first, then the not so strong, and then the weaker ones like that. We can't just jump into the panacea, realize emptiness, and get rid of everything at once. And when you see the people at NASA watching to see if the the rover or whatever it is lands on Mars, you see there's all these hundreds of people sitting in front of their computer screens, and behind them are all thousands of other people who you don't see, if you think about the dependent origination of all that you just see on your TV, of all these hundreds of people and all their computers, and what went into making those computers, the whole development of the computer industry, and the whole thing that went into developing the space program. It's like mind-blowing how many people are involved, and how much time and how much money. So in terms of our landing on the planet of enlightenment as a practitioner of the lamrim, we have to think of even more people that went into building this lamrim. All the hundreds and thousands of yogis and practitioners who wrote all these different texts that we study, and who did these different meditations, and then the countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who've been practicing since beginningless time to reach enlightenment, and this whole enterprise. So that's what's brought to bear in our own personal practice. So we really have behind us an even bigger stuff than NASA has for landing a rover on Mars. All these countless generations of previous yogis and practitioners, and not just in the current era of Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, but going back to beginningless time. We need an even greater diversity of means in the mental and experiential world than they do for landing a spacecraft somewhere. In order to counteract these false views, we need to cultivate all the various elements of the path. That is why there is a need for completeness. So the third point is that we're not just accumulating material things and collecting them in a room. We're trying to transform our mind. So, when I was a kid, I used to collect stamps. So you get an album with all these blank spaces in it. And then I don't know if people still collect stamps or not, but, so it didn't matter how you collected them. You get one first one, and then you get one near the end and one in the middle like that. And you gradually fill up all the spaces like that, That's not how we practice the lamrim. The stages of this transformation must evolve in the right order. First, we subdue gross negative emotions, then the subtle ones. There's a natural sequence to Dharma practice. When we cultivate a path such as bodhicitta, gross levels of understanding, such as the simulated, deliberately cultivated ones, arise sooner than spontaneous, genuine experiences and realizations. Similarly, we need to cultivate the practices for attaining higher rebirths and other favorable conditions of existence before cultivating those for attaining enlightenment. So, that's why we have the stages of the path, and we have to follow them in the right sequence. It's, really easy to understand. These 3 points, correct understanding of the nature of the path, its completeness, and practicing its various elements in the right sequence, are all suggested in the term lamrim. So I think I'm going to stop here. Any questions? Jen?
Thank you, Nick. I had a question going back to the introduction by Khunu Lama Rinpoche, just before he goes to the verse-by-verse commentary on the Lamp for the Path. It talks about where it's derived. It's derived from the ornament of clear realization, and it explains the 3 levels of teachings: the path of the perfection, the practitioners of small, middling, and supreme capacity. That's not to suggest, when going back to the ornament of clear realization, it seems like the 3 practitioners there would be the hearer, the solitary realizer, and the bodhisattva in that text. So that doesn't, I've heard someone say that corresponds to the small, middling, and great scope, but that doesn't make any sense, because if you were a hearer, a solitary realizer, you're in middle scope. You wouldn't be.
Who said that?
I actually read it I read it in Purification in Tibetan Buddhism. It seemed like they were suggesting.
Geshe Jumpa Getso.
Yeah, and maybe I remember I saw in a book, and I never understood that to be the case. Who is the practitioner on the lower scope? You haven't even generated renunciation, so you wouldn't be a hearer.
No, those. It's. When people talk about the 3 yanas, they often say it's the Shravaka yana, the hearer vehicle, the Pratyeka Buddhi yana, the solitary realizer vehicle, and those are both Hinayana vehicles. They're the 2 divisions of the Hinayana, and then the third one is the Mahayana. More loosely, when people talk about 3 yanas, I think people who are involved in Tibetan Buddhism particularly, you think of the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. But the Vajrayana is really part of the Mahayana. So there are 2 Hinayana vehicles, the Shravakayana and the Pratyeka Buddhayana. There are 2 Mahayana vehicles, the Sutrayana and the Vajrayana. So generally, that's not what's meant by the 3 yanas. The Mahayana, the Sutrayana and the Vajrayana. They mean the Pratyekabuddhayana, the Shravakayana, and the Mahayana. I don't know why the three yanas are broken out like that, with the two Hinayana and the one Mahayana, but they don't correspond to the what we call the three scopes, clearly. You know, the Shravakayana, the hero is the, you know, you see the classic picture of the Buddhist monks in the Theravada tradition, and they receive teachings and they go off and meditate and they attain nirvana. The Pratyekabuddhayana isn't like that. It's a solitary realizer. They liken to a rhinoceros. I don't know why. Rhinoceroses are solitary animals. I guess they don't travel in herds or packs or whatever. But, you know, through having received many teachings and done a lot of meditation in previous lives, that practitioner is born with enough knowledge in the mind to be able to just go off into the jungle or into a cave and practice without the need for a physical teacher in that particular life, and attain liberation through their own effort in that way, through practicing, you know, conduct, concentration, wisdom, three higher trainings alone. So that's the Pratyeka Buddha, or the solitary realizer, or the self-realizer. So neither of those, I mean, all of those need to practice. Let's put it another way. The correct terminology for the so-called three scopes is the path practiced, the three paths. The first path is the path practiced in common with the practitioner of least capability. So that is, even if you want to attain enlightenment, you still have to practice the path that the practitioner who is motivated simply by wanting to avoid rebirth in the lower realms practices. So you practice the path in common. That person stops where they've attained freedom from rebirth in the lower realms. But that's not enough. You want to go on to practice the path in common with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. So, so you practice the path in common with that person, but then when that person attains liberation, you haven't finished. You keep going with the path of the practitioner of greatest capability. So even if you're a aspiring bodhisattva, you still have to practice the paths of lower and intermediate capability. So they don't relate to this Pratyeka Buddhas or hearers or bodhisattvas.
I never thought they did, but the way that except that I did read that in one source, and then the way that the intro was read, it explains the three levels of teaching, and because it says it was derived from the Abhisamalankara, I thought that, and that talks about the paths of the hero solitary realizer and the bodhisattva. I thought that was a suggestion that they did, but clearly not. Thank you.
Well, I think from, you know, if you look at a complex text like the Abhisamalankara, I mean, you can interpret and derive a lot of things out of that. Mm-hmm. You know, the explicit and the implicit meanings, and I'm sure, you know, it's such a profound teaching that you could probably use it as a basis for many different explanations of other aspects of the path.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I don't know what's happening next Sunday. I'm not available. So I don't know if, I don't know what's going to happen. I'll be back in 2 weeks to continue this. You know what's happening, Jen?
No, I haven't been involved in the study program.
Deborah, I told Sean too, but I don't know if anything's been decided for next Sunday.
I have not heard anything about next Sunday. So we'll
Okay,
post
well,
on the calendar if there's a plan.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 2 weeks. Jen, do you want to do the dedication prayer?
Okay. Yeah, we'll just do a short one because we're
Yep.
yeah. Sorry. Saji perki jushi me tarcha rirabling jini degen padi sange jingdu mi te uagi droku namda jimna churpa sho idam guru ramandala kamya tayani. In that snow mountain encircled land, source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig remain in life till samsara's end. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion, to the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior, myself, and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Through this virtue may I swiftly, having gained Guru Buddha state, place each and every sentient being without exception in that state. Precious supreme Bodhi mind, may it where unborn arise, and where born never decline, but increase forevermore. Mig mit se wei te chen chen rei zig dream me kien pe wang po chom pe yong gan chen ke pe sun kien song ka pa lo san tra te ja la so wa de.
Okay, so thanks everybody. That was dedicating the merit, basically, because the merit we created, generating bodhicitta, and looking at Atisha's text and his Holiness' explanation, we created a lot of merit. So before we destroy that merit through anger, wrong views, and so forth, we dedicate it to the long lives of our teachers, the infinite spirit of the Dharma, and the quick enlightenment of all sentient beings.
Thank you, Nick.
So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good. Dr. Nick.
Thank you, Nick.